Alright, welcome back to FastGadgets. So what I'm going to talk about today is using Kdenlive to edit and create videos. If you had a chance to see my video I released on the, I believe it was the 23rd of November, the title is 10 Reasons Why Linux is Better Than Mac OS or Windows. I actually edited that video and set everything up in Kdenlive, which has become my go-to editor. So everything that I normally do now, I do in Kdenlive. It just seems to me to work out much better for me. I really don't have the money right now to buy Adobe Premiere Pro, or actually Adobe Premiere I think is all it's called, or Final Cut Pro. Either of those are inexorbitantly expensive, and I have been using iMovie on the Mac, and the iMovie's fine, but it does have some limitations, and I've found that I can work around those much easier using Kdenlive. And I've been using Kdenlive now for maybe, I don't know, 6 months, and you know, it does have some shortcomings, but all video editors have shortcomings, so it just depends what you want. So I'll go through the things I really like about it and how I use it, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the features, and we'll get into what videos look like once they're rendered out. So first of all, the first thing I wanted to mention is usually what I do, I have a template that I've created. And with Kdenlive, you know, you can create your templates pretty much any way you want. So what I did is I've got my FastGadgets intro, and this little tiny slice right here, if I click on it, is actually a transition. So it'll do a dissolve, and it's set for auto. Now you notice it says reverse, and I've actually clicked that. Basically, depending on how this transition was originally created will determine whether this clip dissolves into this one or this one dissolves into the clip above it. So I had to set it for reverse because I accidentally created this filter for a clip below it. Now you'll notice in video 2 there's nothing there yet because this is my template. So I've got, I'm going to turn this down just a hair, my intro, and then I've got the intro music that I set up, and this all runs, you know, right after we begin to cut into the next clip. And then I have a title clip here that basically indicates that I edited this in Kdenlive. And this particular audio track is my music, and it's got what's called a volume setting keyframeable. So I can set audio levels wherever I want them. So I created 3 keyframes on this one. It's hard to see. I got one basically right on top of the other there and one there. So the audio starts out high and then it goes low, and about around this point my voice cuts in. And if I want to, I can slide the scale down here so I can see more. And down here at the end I have my closing music going out, also keyframeable. I really didn't have to do all this on this particular audio track. Instead of using keyframes, I could actually have right-clicked and applied either an effect, fade out, and it would have faded the music out, but I just use keyframes. It's kind of the same thing. And I've got another title clip here, which is the thank you title clip that you see at the end of every video. And then here I've got a which basically just black, so it runs for about 10 seconds, and I have a filter here, so the video track would be running here and then it would fade from this to black. So that's what I was talking to you about earlier. I can reverse this. Right now the way it's set is this video track would be playing and then it would hit this filter and fade to black. If I reverse it, this video track will be playing, it'll switch to black and then fade back to the video, which we don't want. So that's what I usually do. Is I've got this template set up. There are some other property settings that you can create. So if I go into project and go down to project settings, Now, most of these that I'm doing, I just render in full HD 1080, but if I want to, I can go ahead and change it to 4K. But instead of doing that, I created a 4K template, because what happens is your title clips, so if I bring up one of my title clips here, this one's designed for 1080p, so what would happen is basically with 4K, the entire screen area is much larger, so this title clip, the text would become really tiny and would just be a little part of the screen. So I would want to basically redo my title clips so they apply to a 4K screen. So you really don't want to take a video you've been working on in 1080p and then say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and change it to 4K. Unless if you didn't have any graphics, that's perfectly fine. Well, I should say title clips. Pictures and stuff do count too, because if you crop any images, which I'm going to show you in a minute, let's go back to, I'm going to do open recent, and I'm going to cruise back to 10 reasons why Linux is better. And let's have a look at this one. And don't mind my dogs if they start barking. My wife just got home, so they're probably going to get really excited here. So you can see that this particular video is actually much more complicated. And I've got a ton of title clips. And I really would not have wanted to waste all of that time recreating these title clips if I switched to 4K. So it's just easier for me to either do it in 1080p or 4K. You kind of want to choose that before you get started. That's the best thing to do. This particular video was definitely by far my most complicated video that I've produced, and I'm just going to walk you through what I did. Now, everybody's, basically how they do things, how they edit their videos would be completely different, but this is just what I did. First thing that I did go ahead and do was, and this one was a scripted video, so I had a script I went off of, and I laid down my track, and then I went ahead and went through the track and cut out any problems I had in it as far as, pronunciation, or if I redid a line or whatever, I made my cuts and I cleaned that up. Once I had that laid down, then I made a bunch of footage and added in the clips that I used, and these are my title clips here. And then I've got some screen recordings that I did here. I've got some stuff that I did before. I've got a couple of videos that I got that were Creative Commons. I've got some images that I use, some more Creative Commons stuff, and got all my footage collected, and then I started dropping in the pieces and elements that I wanted. Now, this video took quite a lot of time for me to edit and set up, so I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you had a chance to watch it. If you haven't, of course, you can see it. It is available right now, and I'll put a link in the description to it as well. So what you have to do in Kdenlive, of course, now if you're used to iMovie, and I can't say with Final Cut Pro, but when you dissolve or cut between two different videos, you actually put them on different video lines. So I've got my opener here, and if I go ahead and play the opener, and you see it stuttering, it's because I'm recording the screen at the same time, so it's really working hard. But I've got a dissolve set up here, and I can use this option here to zoom in so I can see that dissolve, and if I wanted to, I could slide the track, make the dissolve longer. The dissolve will move with it, and you can choose what transition you want. There's just a ton of different transitions. I've only experimented with some of these. Some of these I just plain don't like. Divide works fine. Dissolve happens to be my favorite, and some that I've experimented with in this particular video is slide, which is pretty cool. and of course wipe. So you can do all kinds of different wipes if you change this from dissolve to wipe. And I actually put in different audio, and I mentioned before that you've got a filter that is keyframeable, so I was able to add in points where I wanted the audio to go down. This one, the audio actually cuts in a little later because there's some pretty Fedora eye candy before we actually start hearing the audio track. So normally I'm good with 3 video tracks. So really what it ends up that I'm doing is I've got audio that I'm cutting back and forth between 2, but as you can see here, I've got a title clip right above my video track, right? And if it happens that my video track was here on 1, and I wanted to put a clip above it, I would have needed another track. So for this particular video, I had to add in a 4th track. Although what I would normally do is cut back and forth between 2 and 3, and then I would have my clips up here in video 1. It just depends what I'm doing. And then, of course, any track, it's very easy to cut. You just do cut clip. You can do scrubbing, but it's nothing like what it would be, you know, for Final Cut Pro or iMovie. That's the one downside to this software. There's a setting in here. If we go to settings and then configure Kdenlive, so these processing threads normally it's normally set for 1, and the problem is you really need more processing threads to make scrubbing work better, but I think it might have to do with my hardware, this Lenovo laptop. I'm going to do some experimenting on my desktop system and I'll let you know, but if I increase my processing threads to more than 1, what basically happens is the video will cut out, or it'll just become a bunch of lines, but everything is still working perfectly, and it'll actually it'll still render correctly. Everything's fine, it just doesn't preview it correctly, so I have to keep processing threads down at 1. Unfortunately, the side effect of that is that you really can't scrub with the video, so you have to be a very innovative editor, so to speak. You have to be very intuitive, I should say. And I don't have a problem with it. It's not a big deal at all with me. You just have to have a little more patience, and I know that, you know, patience is something that's very difficult to come by in today's society, but just a tiny bit of patience and you're fine. Case in point, so I clicked and there's just a slight delay, and then it goes to the spot that you selected. So there's that, and then the other thing is when you're doing playback and you get to something really complicated, like this one here, I've actually got 5 tracks running simultaneously. So if I click in, and I'm not going to let it play right now, but in this particular track I actually had 1, 2, 3, and then 2 audio tracks. So there was a heck of a lot going on at the time, and when you get to that point it can stutter in playback, but rendering is perfectly fine. That would probably be the biggest shortcoming of Kdenlive. And again, now I'm on a Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro. I can't really say because I haven't done quite enough editing with my desktop system, but I'll do some testing in my desktop system and I can tell you how scrubbing and playback is with multiple tracks. But I mean, it's bearable, but it's not the greatest. Now if I try to do it right now while I'm doing a screen capture, it'll just be awful. So there's some good things about Kdenlive, such as when you go to render, you have a bunch of different choices. Now I usually just use MPEG-4 because I know it'll work just fine when I upload it, but there are other choices you can make. Now if you're going to set it up, if you set up a template, you can choose, you know, what type of quality of video that you want to set up. You could do DVD if you want, everything is here. Then you got more options, and here it's talking about encoding speed, and of course I keep it as high as it can go. I set it to 4. If you wanted to script this, there is a script here as well, so you can grab that if you wanted to use FFmpeg or another tool to actually render your video. You could shut down the GUI literally if you wanted to and do it on the command line, though I don't think it'll make any difference as far as rendering time goes. Now, kind of strangely enough, so depending on what setting you want, this really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So if I click away the more options, and this says quality, you know, I'm thinking you go to the right, the quality is highest, which appears to be the case. Really hard to say. I have noticed, you know, I've got it set all the way to the right. Actually, no, I don't want to render right now. I want to look at more options again. It looks really good, and the compression size is good. So basically, this particular video is about 400 megabytes. So uploading compared to iMovie was extremely fast. And the text is still very clear and easy to read, and the audio sounds just fine. So really a very decent file size, which makes uploading much easier for me than iMovie. So this same video in iMovie probably would have been 2 to 3 times the size, and I can upload it much faster, which is a major pro. Now, in the settings I was telling you, if I go to configure Kdenlive, this has been talked about quite a bit. Although you have to have processing threads set as 1, if you leave it as 1 and you render, it actually renders maybe about 25% of the CPU's power. So I, of course, come back in here and turn it up to 4. Now, somebody may say, no, that's not the case. You don't have to do that, but you really do. Because I've actually left it at 1 and tested the rendering time, and then I've changed it to 4 and re-rendered it. And of course, surprise of all surprises, it runs the CPU as fast as it can go, and the CPU only throttles if it's, you know, got a heating issue. So then it might, you know, because of thermal issues, it might actually throttle the CPU down a little bit. So it's usually running between 80 to 100% versus 25%. So you need 1 if you're going to be editing, but after that you want to get in there and switch it to 4 prior to rendering. Now, one of the downsides of Kdenlive is render times. Let's see if it shows. No, it doesn't. Bummer. I was hoping it would show. So I rendered out this video, and this video is right about 10.5 minutes. It actually takes, to render this video, I think it took 18 minutes. This one's extremely complicated. Now, if I do my normal talking head video where I have a video and I do minimal cuts, A to B cuts, and maybe have 2 or 3 title clips, it's going to render usually at about 90% of file of time. So if the video is 10 minutes 30 seconds and it's just, you know, relatively normal and it's 1080p, it's going to end up rendering it in about 8 to 9 minutes. So it's not the fastest in rendering, but it's not too bad either. This, of course, is just a dual core 4th generation i7. If I throw it in my desktop system that has a Phenom X6 6-core processor with 32 gigs, oh no, sorry, 16 gigs of RAM, it actually is much faster. So the processing gets done very fast. So this isn't going to compete in rendering times with, you know, especially not Final Cut Pro, which, as I understand it, it now does some of the pre-rendering in the background. So you're going to get done much faster. Even so, for free, it really works well. Some of these tracks in here where I have multiple layers, I've set up multiple filters. The gain filter works great. I've used the mute filter. Let's see what else I've got on these videos. Yeah, You can do positioning and zoom, so I was able to change the size of this particular video, which was, Windows doing its Windows updates when I wanted to compare between Linux. And then you can crop it as well, so I was able to crop all the different sizes to get it to fit nicely in the corner there. It was all really very intuitive to me. Basically, all I did was I looked at the video, I right-clicked it, and I thought, okay, what do I want to do with this? And went through the different effects. And if you're not sure, the other thing you can do, if you got a video clicked and you go to effects, you can just type in something like crop. All right, maybe not there. Maybe it was no, oh, that's why. I'm not in effects. So I'll go back to effects and I'll type crop. And then it's got crop, scale and tilt, and then edge crop. And of course, you can apply multiple things. So I did position and zoom. Then I did edge crop. So position and zoom was nice, but I didn't want to just shrink the whole screen. I wanted to crop it too, so I added edge crop on top of it. And I've got two different filters running there at the same time. So you can have as many filters. Some are stackable, some aren't. So if you do a transition, you can only have one, of course. It's not going to stack. But all the different transitions have many choices and filters as well. Now, sometimes I really massage my audio because it's got some problems. So in effects, I'll get rid of crop so I can see them all. There are quite a few audio correction filters here. The ones that I've noticed work well for me are gain and mute, volume, keyframeable I use quite a lot. And if you go into, there's just audio and then there's audio correction. I've noticed that some of these filters like band pass and band reject have some popping and cracking in the filter, and it's not there if I don't add it. And I verified by rendering that it actually does, that the audio artifacts, the popping, does appear in the video itself. So I stopped using those, but I needed them. I needed the high pass filter. But if you scroll down a little bit more, there's a couple more called simple high pass filter, or if you need the low one. These ones work great and they don't cause any artifacts in the audio. Again, this is a hardware thing I'm thinking, because I would think a lot more people would be complaining if the regular high pass filter doesn't work. But you can also get more filters too. Those are available, and I forget how to do that, but one of these ways lets you check for new filters, and I forget what it is, but it's in the menu system somewhere. New render profiles, project profiles, templates, new wipes. I could have swore it had filters too. I guess not. I'll look into that because I thought we could get new filters right here through settings as well. So these filters are really nice. The high pass is really nice. I use it a lot to cut off top edge sounds that, like the S, of course. That can be a problem in your audio, so it's really, really helpful. Overall, I would say it's very intuitive. Now, I wasn't able to do something like this when I first started out, so it's something I learned over time, how to cut clips, filtering, the different transitions and other things that are built in, but I've learned quite a lot. Let's see, have I gone over everything I want to go over? Oh, now normally I'm supposed to be able to record audio right inside Kdenlive, but for whatever reason, when I try to record audio in it, I get an error message that basically says I have to check my settings. So I go into settings and I look at configure Kdenlive, and then I go to, I believe it's capture, and I have not successfully yet been able to get this thing to let me capture audio. Maybe if I set it to default, I really don't know. I'll have to try some more different settings, but I had it set to pulse audio. That didn't work, but it would let me capture video, ironically. So I don't know. I'm going to have to see what I can do about that. So in the meantime, I've been using a different recording tool, just recording my audio track and then dropping it in here, which is quite easy. I mean, it's about the same as anything else, you know, whether I was able to record it right in here or not. All I have to do is drag the clip in here, boom, and there it is. And then I just lay out the track and start making my cuts and do whatever I want to do. So that is Kdenlive in a nutshell. You know, don't be intimidated by it. Hopefully you can watch the video. Tell me what you think when you see the actual video that I used to cut this with, and how you think it flows. I saw a couple of things that I didn't like, but overall it was pretty good. I did take quite a lot of time, you know, to work out the different settings that I want and the cuts and filters and the transitions, and it did take me a long time to edit, but you know, under normal circumstances it doesn't take me as long, and I didn't mind because I was learning a lot. And I have to say, Kdenlive is a really good piece of software, and I'm not just saying because it's free, I'm saying because it's actually useful and it works extremely well. On a previous version, I was having some crashing where every once in a while it would crash. It doesn't seem to be a problem anymore under Fedora 25 in the latest version that I have here. Version I'm on right now is 16.08.2, and it works great. I am really impressed, but I will tell you one of the things that I do while I'm editing. So, you know, if I make a change on anything, a star will appear there. I'm going to do Control-Z. Nope, took the star away. But anyway, what I usually do is Control-S frequently to make sure that I'm actually saving often. So pretty much typical for an application. If you want to do a save, just do Control-S. So while I'm working, if I make a cut, I've pretty much gotten myself to the point where I just simply do a Control-S and save it automatically. So in that way, it's not as good as iMovie, where, you know, you're cutting and working and doing all kinds of stuff and then it crashes, which iMovie crashes quite a lot, which makes me chuckle. You know, you just restart iMovie and all your changes and cuts and edits are right there. In this case, this is more old-fashioned, like an application where you actually have to do Control-S to save it. So if you're interested in using Kdenlive, do not be intimidated. It's a great application. I will tell you, though, you got to make sure that you install the full KDE desktop environment. Don't try to run this without it, because then you will have a lot of problems. And the other thing is, you'll notice right now that I'm actually in KDE. It just runs so much better in KDE. One of the big problems is some of these screens, like if I go click on Affine and I decide I want to change it, everything's displayed really nicely and easy to read and see. All this is flat. You don't see boxes or anything. You just see an X and a number, for example. So, you know, it's trying to use, for example, if I opened up KDE in GNOME, well, Kdenlive in GNOME, it just doesn't look as good, and it's not as easy to manage. I mean, it's doable. I did the whole entire edit of this video actually while I was in GNOME, so it's not impossible. I'm just saying that it's easier if you have KDE installed. If you don't have KDE installed and you just try to install Kdenlive, it will not work. You can try to install the dependencies it calls for, but I still had problems, and it kept asking me for more and more and more stuff. And finally I thought it's just going to be easier. I know this won't be a problem if I install KDE, and I did, and I was able to use this editor in other desktop environments. It just happens to look best in KDE. So I think that's everything. If you ever have questions, let me know. Leave a comment on the video and I'll try to get back with you. But it's a great editor for what it does. Definitely can scale up. You know, I did some pretty complicated stuff this time around, and it was able to keep up with me. So hope you liked the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button, and if you really liked the video, go ahead and share it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.